So I'm going to talk to you for the next 10 minutes or so about our other team coaching program, Team Coaching Fundamentals. So the Team Coaching Fundamentals program is a relatively new program we've developed at the AoEC. And we developed it in response to speaking to people who have trained as coaches, so who already are coaches, who are looking to perhaps move more into the team coaching space. So what we often find is when we're working as coaches and people have had a successful relationship with a manager or leader, that individual may then be keen to think about how can we apply some of these tools and techniques that we use in coaching to working with the team. So the program is really designed for people who have undertaken some sort of team coaching training, or at least who are already practicing coaches. And that might be whether you're working as a self-employed individual or through your own business, but also it works well for teams of in-house coaches who are perhaps then looking again to explore how can they apply the skills and competencies and techniques that they have as a coach to working with teams. And you'll see on this slide, we've got an outline of the main learning outcomes. So we're looking at providing people with knowledge of some of the team coaching and team related theories and models. So you may already have experience of working with teams or supporting teams, perhaps in another capacity, such as training or facilitation, but you may not as a coach. And in the same way that you need some sense of leadership and management models and theories when you're coaching individuals, we look to cover some of that. We have a competency framework and we structure the program around the competency framework. So you have a clear sense of what are those core competencies you need to coach teams effectively. We look to ensure that you gain some experience in team coaching by having a case study that runs throughout the 3 days, where you get the opportunity both to coach that team and to role play the team members, so that feeling both sides of coaching and being coached in a team capacity. And we also look particularly at resilience, because it's a sort of AoEC philosophy that we believe resilience and well-being is incredibly important. And there's an opportunity when we're working with teams to also bring that agenda front and center, which we know is particularly important after the events of the last few years. But also really, we're looking here at your resilience as a coach when you're working with teams. Because we know there are lots of stresses and complexities to one-to-one coaching. And really, those are only magnified when we start coaching teams. And lots of interesting things can be happening with the dynamic or with teams when they're under pressure. So we look at how can you as a coach remain centered and grounded when you're working with teams at challenging times. So what does that look like in practice? So like the STCC, the certificate, this is 3 days, but we don't have the pre and post sessions. So we look at 3 consecutive days. There isn't any pre-work for the program. And we've been running it virtually until recently, and hopefully shifting more into also offering it face-to-face throughout the course of this year. And if you've already undertaken an AoEC program, I think the style of the design and facilitation of this program is going to be very familiar to you, because it's following some of those core AoEC principles. So we're looking partly at how we come together as a learning community over those 3 days, and how we learn as much from each other as you are from the faculty or from the theories and models and experiences we offer on the program. And we're taking a very blended approach to the program design. So we do our best to equip you as well as you can in the time available with tools, models, and modalities, ways of thinking that you can apply when you're working as a team coach. we give you as much opportunity to play around with those as possible through discussion, group work and pair work. And we also have this team coaching simulation that runs across 3 days. So you get that opportunity both to practice and to experience what team coaching is like when you're the recipient of it or a participant in it, perhaps. So just to give you a sense then of what the program covers, at the heart of the program is the AoEC's team coaching competency framework. And you may well be aware, but a number of the regulatory bodies, such as the ICF, have been coming up with their competency frameworks more recently. What we've done with the AoEC competency framework for team coaching is align with those existing models, but we take a slightly different approach in that we say that across these 6 competencies, right in the heart of them is what we call coaching fundamentals. So the starting point for the program is saying coaching is coaching, whether you're coaching a person or coaching a team. Let's be clear about those fundamental skills and competencies you hopefully already have coming on the program. And let's think about how might you apply those in the context of working with a team and see what's translatable with your existing skill set. And then with the other 5 competencies, we're looking at what else do you need to know to be effective when working with teams? So if we look at team insight, for example, we're saying you need to know stuff about what constitutes a team, what different types of teams there are, what are models of high-performing teams, for example. We're looking at team catalyst. We're looking at how do you create a learning environment in which teams can develop and flourish. So we're looking again at perhaps how you might structure working with a team through a coaching session or a program of sessions, also referring to the CIDR model that Danny was talking about. So if you were to choose to do one program and then the other, you'll see there's a correlation of some of those core tools that run across them. We look at the competency of coach as facilitator. So thinking about what are those moments when you step out of a pure coaching role into facilitating a team, perhaps to do a creative exercise or something practical, and how can you be super aware of those boundaries between when you're working as a coach, when you're operating as a facilitator, or if you're stepping perhaps into the training space, and being very mindful of the differences between them, but also what some of the skills you need in facilitation are. We have a competency about systems awareness. So we spend a morning doing an introduction to thinking in terms of systems thinking, tools and models, but then in particular, how might we think of our team as a system or embedded in other systems? And then we look at resilience and self-care in the second half of the last day, where we provide some models on resilience and we do some work on how might we look after ourselves when we're working in this space. So to give you a sense of what I mean by that, when we're talking about the coaching fundamentals, which is where we start off on day one saying, let's think about the skills we have as coaches and how we might apply them. And then we start to use that in the role play case study in the first afternoon. We'll be looking at these core competencies, which I'm sure you will recognize from your coaching practice, and saying, let's see about how these apply in the team context. And with the rest of the program, then we look at each of those competencies in turn, sort of roughly for kind of half a day across the 3 days. We share some tools and models, we do some discussion and exercises with them. And then the case study, when we move into the role play, we'll be suggesting how you might look at using those competencies in the role play as we follow the story of what's happening to that team throughout the 3 days. In terms of tools and models, it's a part of the way we tend to train, develop these programs at AoEC is to give you a taster of a number of useful things so that you can take them and start using them straight away, but also aware that as coaches, we're tend to be on a sort of a lifelong learning journey. So it's a taste of with things that are useful that you may choose to explore in more depth or to build your learning around. But we do cover some of everything that you see here on the screen. So we have a model of the characteristics of high-performing teams, which is, I find it a really useful model because it's based on a meta-analysis of several thousand research papers on high-performing teams, looking at what are the key characteristics that come out of that research. So that's something you can start going to and applying with working with teams straight away. We cover 2 or 3 theories on team dynamics, as we're inviting you to start tuning into the team's system as you start working with them. We look at the resilience models, we do work on contracting, we provide some input around facilitation techniques, and we do quite a lot of time on really unpicking that question of how is coaching different from facilitation and different from training or different from consultancy, and how might you occasionally need to blend some of those different skills and be very conscious of how you're doing that. So just a few words then about the coaching practice. So we have a case study role play that runs across the 3 days, and we go through 5 different iterations of that. So we go from working with the team right at the very beginning through to session 5, which could be towards the end, perhaps many months later. We always do our coaching practice in pairs. So you get the chance to practice, but you co-coach with someone else. And you then also have the experience of being coached by role-playing the team members with a little scenario that's set up each time as your kind of jumping off point into your practice. You will get feedback when you're coaching from the people role-playing the team, from the observers, but also from the experienced faculty. So you'll get lots of different inputs. And I think that really reflects part of the ethos with this program, where we aim to take a bit of time to work through these things to create an environment where you can do your best learning, and also where you can really benefit from the views and ideas and experience of other people on the program, and in particular through that feedback, but also when you're working in group work and discussions. And we look to make sure that that case study is actually bringing up topical issues and challenges that teams often face in the 21st century working environment. And that all helps. By the end of the 3 days, while you may not feel like the world's greatest expert in team coaching, you should certainly feel an increase in your confidence and your competence to go out and start using those coaching skills in the team context. And then just a final slide. I won't talk through this because you could refer back to it at another time, but just a sense of how those 3 days break up. So we do quite a lot in the morning about coming together as a learning community, contracting, and we're doing all of that in the way that you might do actually when you're working with a team in a coaching context. So there's that parallel between how we're running the program and how you might use those same competencies when you're working with a team. We look at that process for structuring, and we get into our first role play on day 1. Then we're looking at different types of teams and high-performing teams on day 2, as well as spending the afternoon looking at team dynamics and the differences between facilitation and coaching. And then day 3, we do a quick but quite deep dive into systems thinking and how that relates to teams, and then the well-being and resilience in the afternoon, all with the practical elements and the role play to bring each piece to life before we move on to the next competency. So that seems like a good place to pause. Hopefully that's given you an overview.